Right, us versus them. While we pay to keep our politicians fighting, how do we, the people, rise up and solve the great challenges of our time? We do it by embracing freedom and liberty. There may be no such thing as a free lunch, but this hour is as close as it gets. Welcome to A Free Solution.
Welcome, everyone, to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wills, your host today. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate you being here. We're live here on WYSL until 1 p.m., so give us a call, 585-346-3000. If you want to participate in the conversation, that's 585-346-3000. Of course, shout out down the line to our friends listening over at WACK out in Newark and WENY, the Patriot down in Southern Tier, and our friends listening online on A Free Solution Facebook page. Make sure you like that page. A Free Solution YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to that, or one of the Kevin Wilson pages on Facebook or on Twitter. Thank you all for being here, and to our podcast listeners as well. All right. So today I want to talk about what's going on in Texas. I've seen a bunch of stories. It's like, as usual, right and left live in two totally separate worlds. We're looking at two different perspectives on the same incident. Down in Texas, there are millions of people who've been experiencing blackouts the last couple of days. Of course, the middle of the country, it's wild. It's the deep freeze that folks have gotten in these areas is, well, not fun. I mean, we see that in this area, in Rochester, upstate New York, every once in a while. But middle of the country, places like Texas, they ain't used to that. They ain't prepared for that. Some of these other states, too, in the South, getting snow, ice, freezing temperatures, just not something that they're used to doing. And so in Texas, they're experiencing these freezing temperatures, this ice, the snow, all this stuff, and their power grid is shutting down. And the two narratives that I've seen is, one, green energy is causing this because Texas relies too much on wind power and the wind turbines froze. Green energy is not reliable enough to supply a power grid. Texas's big mistake is relying on wind energy when bad weather happens. There's something to that argument. Not in this particular case. We'll talk about why it doesn't totally apply here, but there's still good reason to not rely on wind energy too much. There's some drawbacks, there's some trade-offs that the lefties and the greenies that they don't really consider with wind energy. And then there's the other side of this. So what I'm hearing from my left-wing friends from high school, college, and whatnot on Facebook, they're saying Texas is in a blackout because of deregulation. Those darn Texans and their secessionist attitudes, they didn't want to comply with federal regulations, and that's why they're experiencing power outages. And thanks again to friends who are listening online. Ryan, hey, what's up, man? Thanks for listening today. Appreciate you being here. But we're going to go over both these narratives, what makes sense, what doesn't, and how prepared our energy grids need to be for this situation, and maybe how prepared you need to be too, because we can't always rely on the state or the quasi-private companies and entities that run these power grids to provide for us in emergency situations. So we'll get to all that. And again, if you want to participate in this conversation, 585-346-3000. If you are from Texas and listening, or you lived there for a while, and you have thoughts on their unique grid situation and the shift that they are experiencing towards green energy, give us a call. We'd love to hear from you, or leave a comment online. So let's talk about the green energy thing. So I've seen people like Dan Crenshaw commenting on this. He's a congressman from Texas. I've seen conservative commentators go around. There's a Wall Street Journal article called like A Deep Green Freeze that talks about, and that's from the editorial board. It talks about how the wind turbines are what's causing this. And you may have seen like the meme going around too. There's like the helicopter de-icing the wind turbines. That's not from Texas. It's not from this year. It's actually from, I think, Sweden? It's one of the Nordic countries, which is something that totally happens. The wind turbines get too iced up and they can't function. So it's something that can happen in certain climates. If you're using wind energy, they can get a buildup of ice and snow and lock up. So that'll happen. Uh, so people are looking at this situation in Texas and thinking that must be what's happening here. Texas increased their reliance on wind power. I think they went from 4% to closer to 10% over the last few years. So they've tripled what they've been producing in terms of wind energy, and they have not become more reliant on that, but they've certainly integrated that into their energy policy. And so there it goes that in these type of situations, you need to have coal and natural gas in order to have a stable source of power in emergency situations. In fact, we have seen some of this in California. That argument played out, I think, a little bit more accurately in some of the California blackouts when we were seeing in response to the heat wave that they experienced last summer, and we spent a segment on this show talking about it too. California has become so reliant on green energy within their state that when the wind doesn't blow or when the sun doesn't shine, that they have fluctuations in power supply that aren't able to match with demand. And that's one of the big issues with green energy. It is a real issue with green energy that you can only use what's being provided at the time, and what's being provided at the time depends on conditions. And if the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow or you have another environmental factor that makes it difficult to produce power, you're going to be in trouble. You're not going to be able to get that energy. And what California ends up doing is, although they've internally tried to rely on as much solar and wind energy as possible, occasionally they still have to rely on natural gas and other carbon-producing energy sources outside of their state whenever demand doesn't match with supply. You need to have a reliable source of energy in order to do that. And got a comment also from Ryan, Gen 4 nuclear doesn't care about weather. And oh yeah, no, I'm a big stand for nuclear power, and that was part of California's problem too, that they have been getting rid of nuclear power plants, and that's something that's happened all around the country. Is that there's less reliance on nuclear power plants. It's so difficult to build nuclear power resources that people don't use them, or state governments, politicians are so afraid of nuclear power resources that they don't end up using those as well. And green resources like wind and solar, which have their benefits. I'm not totally opposed to wind and solar. I'm just saying that there's drawbacks to those, that they seem nicer and more environmentally friendly than nuclear, because people think that there's going to be all this waste and whatnot. It's really not what's happening. But with the Texas situation, it wasn't just the wind that was a problem. So there's something like 34 gigawatts of generation capacity that was knocked out off the grid. But most of that, there was some of that was wind energy that was experiencing those problems, but most of that was coal, nuclear, natural gas. There's some nuclear plant that was knocked out of capacity. The big thing here is actually natural gas has been experiencing some serious problems in Texas because there's a lot more demand for natural gas for heating. They do have all these pipelines in Texas, but you're trying to get the demand fed for these natural gas producing power plants and demand for heating. And because Texas is used to warmer weather, they weren't expecting to have to be insulated in quite the same way, and they were having issues with getting supply to these power stations. Everything got so cold. There's just issues with meters and regulators and gas supply. Things are freezing up and locking up. And so a lot of the reason that the people in Texas are experiencing power problems is just because they're not ready for cold. It's not just a wind thing. It's also a coal and gas and everything thing. And again, I have my criticism of green energy. I think that until wind and solar are able to save that energy, until we're able to have batteries that are effective enough for that to be a reliable source of power all the time, it's a problem. Wind and solar also take up an enormous amount of land compared to nuclear power. I don't think it is possible or sustainable to build enough wind and solar capacity on their own to be able to provide power for the entire United States. It takes up way too much land. It takes up a ton of resources. They have their own problems. I'm more of a nuclear power proponent, although having these other things is good. It's not a bad thing to have wind and solar. I don't like the subsidies for it. I don't think that we should buy in as the only solution, but we are seeing legitimate price drops in wind and solar over time, and as there's more of a market, I would love it in absence of subsidies, but as there's more of a legitimate market, there's, I think, predicted to be a 45 to 50% drop in wind and solar cost over the next 10 years. Great. Some people are going to use that. That's how markets are going to go. That's going to work. Great. It can be part of the solution. Wonderful. But it's not the only thing. But Texas, point is that the only problem they're experiencing isn't green energy. It's a bigger, wider problem with coal. And in the next segment, we'll talk about the counter narrative to that. What people on the left saying, oh, deregulation caused this. Well, did it? We'll dig into that next event here on A Free Solution. Thanks again for joining us. If you want to participate in the conversation, 585-346-3000. We're going to be back in just a few minutes.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovations should be your first call. They've won the Best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
When you've been seriously injured in a car crash, you need a lawyer who knows how to beat the big insurance companies. Call me and I'll take them on so you can focus on your health and family.
Car crash, call Salino. Salino, call Salino. 888-2020.
Main Street, Rochester. A message from the National Police Association. It used to be that any able-bodied person would offer to assist a police officer in danger. Now, passers-by are more likely to take a video. There's a better use for your phone when an officer's in trouble. Call 911. Tell the operator where you are and what you see. Then, start your video to provide evidence later. To learn more about how you can assist law enforcement, visit nationalpolice.org. That's nationalpolice.org.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to Simple Tech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that Simple Tech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at Simple Tech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the Best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at Simple Tech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
A free solution.
Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host today. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate y'all being here. And we'll get to some of your comments online, too. Right, it says Generation 4 is not your granddad's nuclear. This is safe and no waste. Yeah, there's like salt reactors and whatnot that basically no waste. They burn it all up. It's a great thing. Something that I'd like to see more of. Nonconformist Farmer says nuclear power doesn't care about weather. How about the Fukushima reactor issue? Well, that issue was more of an issue with the earthquake and tsunami that hit the power plant, and just to get through some of the propaganda of that. The overall environmental impact and human impact of that was relatively small. In nuclear power accidents and damage due to nuclear power is so infinitesimal compared to pretty much every other type of power generation, especially coal and natural gas. They are dangerous. They do have impacts. Like, they do provide great, reliable sources of power, but let's not pretend there's not an externality from that. They pollute. It's dangerous work to extract that, and not a lot of people, but more people than nuclear die in coal and natural gas production than in nuclear power. And actually, in regards to the weather too, with the nuclear power issue, so weather can impact nuclear power apparently. In Texas, I'll share a link about that, because there was a nuclear power plant shut down in relation to this. The power plant just wasn't prepared for the cold. And I want to talk about that in the third segment, like how much do you need to prepare for that type of stuff. But the nuclear power plant just wasn't built expecting a once in every, century or twice every century deep freeze. So they weren't prepared for that. Now, that leads into that argument that I was talking about that I'm seeing from my progressive friends. Well, Texas is just a bunch of stubborn free marketers, and that's why we have this problem. If they had been following federal regulations, none of this would have happened. Now, Texas is in a unique situation. In the United States, there's essentially 3 massive power grids that are regulated by the federal government, but Texas, because it is not interstate, it is intrastate, is totally contained within Texas, does not have to comply with the same types of federal regulation on energy that the other power grids do. So New York State might share its power with other states and whatnot. So there's all these different states, like the big chunk of the East Coast going out to Rocky Mountains, and then a big chunk of the West Coast. A lot of these power plants, where they're located, might share and exchange power across state lines, and that does create a certain level of resiliency too. And so there's a little something to this critique, but Texas is big enough where a system like this should work, barring no catastrophe. But it does create resiliency, right? Like if a power plant in New York gets knocked off, there are different ways to reroute power from other areas to be able to make sure that people can get power. So the argument goes that because Texas has an independent system, that is what made it vulnerable, because we're seeing a massive amount of rolling blackouts in Texas, that it is within their power grid system, which is called what the ERCOT. So that's their power system, and it's like a quasi. It's one that's so always so weird with power generation stuff, with power grid stuff. So much power generation, because you do have some independent energy providers and whatnot, particularly New York State. But the grid itself is always sometimes a private corporation, but usually it's so regulated and so controlled by government, they're given a natural monopoly. In economics, we think of some things like, well, I don't really like the term natural monopoly, because I don't really think there's any such thing. It doesn't have to be a monopoly, but the power resource providers, like not the resource providers, but the wires that get the power to your house, that's considered a natural monopoly. So it's usually put in the hands of a single company or a series of companies that cooperate together under government oversight. So that's why we have RG&E in Rochester. We have like Niagara Mohawk out in other places. But Another comment here. Texans can't go ahead and produce their own power without regulation, so no, they aren't independent. Yeah, I mean, they do still have some regulation. So it's to me kind of preposterous to say like they are totally without regulations in Texas, because of course they are. The federal government has their hand in everything. But that was the explicit goal of a mostly independent Texas grid, was to make sure that the federal government couldn't regulate their power supply as much. And that because of those regulations, and the argument goes, we have massive blackouts in that state. But there's always pros and cons to that, right? Like, there's a lot of federal government regulations, and I think we can make an argument for this across the board, that are so risk adverse that they end up becoming bloated and expensive. Should Texas, for a once or twice a century cold snap event, have to harden all of their energy production resources to make sure that such a rare event can't impact their power supply? How much are they willing to spend? How much would you be willing to spend as a taxpayer, as someone paying the energy bills, to make sure that something that could only happen once every 3-4 decades doesn't happen? I don't know that there's an unlimited cost to that. I don't, in New York State, where we're going to experience extreme cold temperatures more often, it's worth making sure that we protect the power supply. It needs to be different. And so we need to be prepared for that. So it is worth the cost. In Texas, where something rare like that is never going to happen, maybe not. Like, would we need to, in the Rochester region where I live, would we need to harden all of our power generation equipment for earthquakes? Does that make sense? We don't really get earthquakes here. It doesn't make as much sense to spend all these additional resources on an event that is not going to happen. Same with hurricanes. We don't really get hurricanes in this area. It's not something we need to worry about. When we're thinking about any type of infrastructure, there's a cost-benefit analysis that needs to be made. How much additional money do you spend to prepare for an exceedingly rare event? And in Texas, they made the calculation, understandably so, that a deep freeze, a cold like this, wasn't going to happen, or would rarely happen. They didn't expect people to do that. And I got a comment online. I was going to say the same thing about New York blackouts. Sure, don't happen from being independent. Yeah, we don't have an independent power grid in New York State, but blackouts still happen here too for a bunch of different reasons. A lot of times it's infrastructure on power lines. But it was 2 years ago, 2019, we had blackouts that lasted for weeks in some areas of Rochester. We had a severe windstorms that. We had a big windstorm that knocked out a bunch of the power lines, and then a deep freeze after that. So we had people in my city who were going without heat in single-digit temperatures. And same thing. Sometimes natural disasters happen. There's only so much you can prepare and harden the grid and harden the power resources in preparation for natural disasters. And sometimes you just have to be able to deal with those natural disasters effectively. RG&E got a ton of heat for that, but a windstorm with 70-mile-an-hour winds is not something that is happening every day in Rochester. I think there's some things they could have done better about that for sure, but it's not. It's just something that you have to prepare for. Sometimes the power's going to get knocked out. The governments cannot prepare. Power companies can't prepare. Grid providers can't prepare for every single eventuality. Sometimes you just need to be able to react effectively to natural disasters and get everything back up as soon as possible. So as far as Texas regulations goes, no, I don't think deregulation is the cause of this. And they're just like everything else, there are pros and cons to that. You're not going to have federal government telling you what to do. You also have more independence to be able to innovate and to provide new things well. And I don't know enough about the Texas power grid to know how that's happening, but I'd rather, as much as possible, communities to be able to be independent and respond effectively to their needs without the heavy-handed of government telling them what to do. So So thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, host today. We're going to be back in a few minutes, but if you want to give us a call, think about how does this situation impact us here in New York, or me here in New York, or if you're listening anywhere else, if you're listening in Texas, give us a call, 585-346-3000. We'll be back here on A Free Solution in a few minutes.
Don't be muzzled. AM 1040 Avon Rochester, FM 92.1 Rochester, and FM 95.5 Spencerport.
Here's the latest forecast from the News 10 NBC Weather Center for tonight. We'll have mostly cloudy skies, temperatures in the low teens, so another cold night out there on your Thursday. Cloudy in the morning, a bit of light snow in the afternoon. Could be up to an inch or so through the day, another inch or two Thursday night into Friday morning. Maybe a little freezing drizzle as well. Watch for a few slick spots, and then lake effect snow possible on Friday night. I'm Rich Cadelia, WYSL.
At Victor Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram Anthony Drive off Route 96 in Victor. They're helping you drive safe during winter weather and save big at the same time with 4x4 security and Jeep quality and luxury. For a limited time, lease a 21 Jeep Gladiator Sport 4x4, $199 a month for 42 months. A 2021 Jeep Grand Cherokee Laredo 4x4 is just $279 a month for 36 months. Lease a 2020 Jeep Renegade Latitude 4x4, only $159 a month for 36 months. Or a 2021 Jeep Compass Latitude 4x4 is $179 a month for 36 months. The 2021 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited is just $309 a month for 39 months. Jeep, America's iconic four-wheel drive brand. And Victor's got a great selection. $2,500 cash or trade and other conditions apply. Be sure to get full details from the dealer. Equipment and MSRP vary by model. We're here to fully serve Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram customers in Victor, Canandaigua, Macedon, Fairport, and throughout the Metro and Finger Lakes. Shop with confidence and safety and full CDC compliance. Victor Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram, 6560 Anthony Drive in Victor.
I'm Steve Tasker, and I want you to know that Heritage Christian Services is growing and hiring people to assist adults with developmental disabilities. Over the years, my wife and I have come to know the agency, and we've seen firsthand how the staff provides compassionate and dignified support each and every day. Listen to why people like working at Heritage Christian Services.
I didn't have any experience working closely with people, like following their health plans and assisting them with daily tasks. But Heritage Christian Services helped me to learn the balance between respecting a person's independence and being there to support them when necessary. Working here makes me feel like I have more than just a job, and I appreciate the generous benefits and paid time off.
You don't need experience to apply to Heritage Christian Services, but you need to be dedicated to serving others. They'll give you the training you need, a chance to earn national credentials, and an opportunity to grow as a person. For job opportunities, visit futureyoucareers.org. That's futureyoucareers.org.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to SimpleTech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that SimpleTech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at SimpleTech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at SimpleTech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
If you're looking to market and grow your business, make new business connections, and give back to the community in a meaningful way, consider joining the Greece Regional Chamber of Commerce. We're the largest suburban chamber in Monroe County, and we offer networking, education, marketing, insurance, and advocacy. You do not need to live or work in Greece to join. Our members come from throughout the region. In short, we're better together, and together, we're moving business forward. Visit greecechamber.org or call 585-227-7272 to join today.
WYSL and the Roberts Wesleyan Athletic Department proudly feature the Red Hawk Report, Tuesday and Thursday mornings at 8:45 and Wednesday afternoons at 4:45. Each week, the Roberts Wesleyan Athletic Department will keep you up to date on vital issues in the Rochester area's only Division II sports program. The Red Hawk Report is made possible by Golisano Children's Hospital and Heritage Christian Services. The Red Hawk Report, exclusively on your local college sports leader, WYSL 92.1 FM and 1040 AM.
A Rochester favorite since 1880, Zweigel's is celebrating a milestone anniversary, serving up red hots, white hots, sausage, meatballs, and more.
No one makes it hot to like Swigels, 'cause how we make 'em makes 'em great.
Over 140 years and still popping.
Remember Scotty's Detail Auto Body for all of your body paint and collision repairs. And also remember, it's still the collision shop of your choice during that unfortunate time. Scotty's Detail Auto Body, Route 15 East Avon, just a quarter mile north of I-390, exit 9.
A free solution.
All right, welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host today. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you being here. Appreciate you listening today. We're here live on WYSL until 1 p.m., so you can give us a call, 585-346-3000, if you want to participate in the conversation. Or send me a message online, too, on Facebook, on YouTube, or on Twitter, too. I got a comment from Twitter I'm going to read in a second. And, of course, shout out down the line to our friends listening over at WACK out in Newark and WENY, the Patriot, down in the Southern Tier. And if you ever miss any part of this episode, you want to catch the whole thing, we do have the podcast on WYSL1040.com. And just look up A Free Solution, any podcast app. It's there. You can find it. You can listen to all of our episodes, all the way back to the Radio Free New York days. But let me get to that comment on Twitter. Jeremiah says, isn't it kind of wild to argue that this is something that only happens once every 3 or 4 decades, when just a single decade ago this problem happened and the result was a recommendation to winterize, and then they just didn't. Jeremiah, that is a absolutely fair point. Back in 2011, there was also a deep freeze in Texas, and something similar happened, right? Basically, the power grid was not prepared to supply all the power for some of the same reasons, because they lost capacity just because of the cold, just because they had trouble getting gas through the lines. There's issues with pumping. Texas is also not storing as much natural gas to be able to serve as a backup when something goes wrong. And for their nuclear power capacity, which is only a small percentage of the Texas grid, I guess the issue is that sometimes the water lines, the coolant lines, freeze and create issues, and it just automatically trips and shuts down the generators. So yes, this did happen in 2011, and I'll see if I can share an article afterwards. But in 2011, there's a federal report that recommended winterizing everything because they also had a deep freeze. So I guess this has happened a little while ago, and that report said that they should winterize the natural gas production and wind turbines too, which there's some protections that you can take to make sure wind turbines are less likely to shut down in cold. And the other interesting thing about Texas in particular is because usually their power demand is much lower in the winter, unlike New York, where we're cranking our heaters and trying to keep our homes warm in the winter. In winter, it's usually when Texas power plants sometimes shut down to do maintenance, and there's usually enough grid capacity to be able to do those things. And in this situation and in the previous situation, power plants were shut down to do that sort of maintenance because it isn't peak demand anymore, and now they've run into issues. So yes, there is something they could have done about that, and that is something that people in Texas need to consider. Is that cost worth it? You had it happen 10 years ago. You had it happen now. Do you need to make that investment? Does the power companies need to do that? And it sounds like we have a caller on the line, too. Cheryl from Hilton, what's on your mind?
Just a quick commentary in regard to this natural energy production. I was born and raised out in North Dakota, and I have been up in arms because of the wind turbines, and at one point I had to argue at our school district meeting with them putting one right adjacent to one of our elementary schools. I'm failing to understand the push for this, and when I inquired as to why they would not factor in hydropower to the point that we here in New York could use it more to our advantage. Yes, we've got the Niagara Falls, the best example you want to present us with, but they will not allow us to do anything like along the Susquehanna, which originates way upstate by Albany, and the impact of that going down further. My husband is born and raised in Pennsylvania, so he's we're locked into the brain function there. We aren't happy until we have a little cottage down in PA. Well, I think it was 2017. The horrendous damage that was done due to the lack of controls on that Susquehanna River was atrocious. Has anybody explain that? And if you want to tell me that we should substitute with hydro, the Japanese power, or atomic generation.
Nuclear power.
We've got a factor here where they can't find storage place for that waste that's generated from that nuclear power. The Earth is only so big, and that is a very, very damaging health-wise component of that form. Why are we, if we want to be natural and use it, why are we not using our hydropower to our best? Have you got any answers on that one?
Cheryl, the best explanation I can think of is that we are using some hydropower, like they use like Middle Falls in Rochester to do that, and the Niagara Falls. I don't know about the Susquehanna River or any of that stuff, but the best argument I can make against hydropower, even though I'm a big proponent of that too, is that it is disruptive to ecosystems. If you're usually damming up a river, and it can be disruptive to an area. A lot of power generation used this way end up like flooding entire valleys, whole towns to be able to do that. We saw that in Tennessee. We saw that in upstate New York too. So that's the difficulty of bringing on new hydroelectric, although that's part of the solution too. And there's also really cool ideas around using hydroelectric power as batteries, where they basically take water and they pump it back up into a dam when you have excess power from wind, solar, or whatever, and use that to generate electricity later. So that should be part of the solution. And as far as nuclear power goes, the thing is the amount of waste produced by nuclear power is just very small. It's not that much waste produced in relation to how much power it generates, and particularly compared to like coal. Coal produces a lot of coal ash waste, which is way more toxic. You can easily contain nuclear power waste, and newer generators really burn it all up too. So this is like the old school nuclear power plants. They produce a little bit more waste, but it's really like a small barrel per,
Yeah. Well, I know they bury that down in caves, and God forbid we ever have an earthquake. We're going to be walking in Japan's footsteps. But coming, like I said, I was born and raised in North Dakota. The advantage of having, I'm up in age. As a kid growing up, it was the Garrison Dam, and then the name has gone to the Sakakawea Reservoir. That power that's generated through that whole scenario down that Missouri River is unbelievable. And I'm failing to understand why we can't look at a scenario like that, look at the pros and cons. Yes, it took additional acreage to create that dam, and North Dakota was set for that. But the crazy part is I got out there in 2011 for a big reunion, and I'm going, oh, my God, I got up by Bismarck. Here we got these idiot people building these million-dollar homes down on the shores of the Missouri. And then they cried when the engineers didn't regulate it properly, and they had flooding damage. Is there any common sense in people?
Yeah, I don't know if I want to answer that question because the answer might be no. But yeah, no, I mean that's definitely another thing to consider as well. It's just
you make certain areas restricted for building, and I mean it's like how do we expect Mother Nature to control the ocean, and we allow people to build their huge houses out on the beaches, and then we pay through the insurance. The national insurance to recoup their property damage. I fail to understand the reasoning behind that. But who am
Yeah,
I?
I mean, that's a whole other issue, too, with we subsidize through, like, the National Flood Insurance Program risky building, right? And that's a hazard of providing that program, is that we end up getting people to put homes in places that they really shouldn't be, and then we, the taxpayers, end up paying for that. But it's a very popular program, and Congress loves it, and no one wants to take it away. All right, Cheryl, anything else to add for the power grid before we go to break?
Okay, real quick. I just wish we could had a way of checking the IQ on some of the politicians that we have working here. I'm sick and tired of them stuffing their pockets, and we are unable to track it. But you and I both know that they come out a lot better off than they were when they went in. So there's factors that work against us that we have no control over, and I just love to be able to breathe my fresh air on such a beautiful day. But 12 inches of snow the other night was a little more than my driveway was making me comfortable with at 77 years of age. So, yes, thank you for your time.
Thank you for calling, Cheryl. Really appreciate you calling in and giving your thoughts on this. And if anyone else wants to call in and give their thoughts, give us a call, 585-346-3000. We're talking about the power grid. We're talking about the situation in Texas. If there's a cause for that, if there's something that should change, something that we should think about in our own states. 585-346-3000. We'll be back here on A Free Solution in a few minutes.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to SimpleTech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that SimpleTech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at SimpleTech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at SimpleTech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
Hi, my name is Ryan Bourne.
And I'm Danica Bourne.
And we're the owners of South Coast Tax. We would like to thank our Lord for protecting us from evil. Psalm 91 states, "He is my refuge and my fortress, for he will rescue us from every trap and protect us from deadly disease."
South Coast Tax are Christian-based tax accountants and attorneys who specialize in releasing bank levies, wage garnishments, and filing complex tax returns. We are the leaders in acceptance of offers and compromise with awesome results.
We are also a small firm who will treat you like family and not just a number.
Call us today at 1-800-TAX-1176 for a free consultation, and we'll take the time to explain all of the programs that you qualify for in order to allow you a fresh start.
In John 8:36, so if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. And one way we can achieve that is by being debt-free. So let us help you today. Call us at 1-800-TAX-1176, and together we can help achieve this goal by putting the IRS tax debt behind you for good. Again, that number is 1-800-TAX-1176.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at SimpleTech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, SimpleTech Innovations should be your first call. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
A free solution.
Welcome back to A Free Solution. Appreciate you being here. appreciate you commenting, participating in the discussion online, and appreciate the calls as well. Hydroelectric power, also part of the solution. I do think that if we're going to have a power grid, we're going to have that, having multiple types of power sources are great. I get the calls for carbon-free stuff. I'm not opposed to wind and solar generation, but there are drawbacks to those. I got in a comment I didn't read earlier saying that the cost of the kind of carbon impact of the concrete used to put up wind turbine negates its positive effects. I've heard mixed data on that, to be frank, that it depends on where it's used, how much materials are put into that. So you could, on net, off-put the amount of energy production from wind turbines compared to coal and natural gas infrastructure, depending on how it's built and how much you use it and whether or not it breaks down beforehand. So it could, the data is mixed on that, but I've heard that same thing too, that the carbon input of producing wind turbines isn't always offset by the energy production that they're off-putting from carbon resources, if that's something that's important to you. But other data suggests that that's not really true. That as long as you're running them effectively for a while, that they are on net less carbon producing for wind turbines. And solar panels, they have their own drawbacks too with the metals used in those. The disposal of both those products can be costly from an environmental perspective, and that's trade-off. Again, what's more important. I'm a fan of both, really. I think that they're part of the solution. You also have to worry about the energy storage thing I talked about. If you're able to effectively store wind or solar energy with either chemical batteries or gravity batteries or hydro batteries, which is what I kind of started talking about in the last segment too, where you pump a bunch of water into like a dammed off area and have it generate power that way, then hey, that's a cool thing. If you're able to do that, do it effectively, it works for your state, great. But I do want to talk about too, like what do we do as individuals in response to these situations? And this is just me being on my personal preparedness soapbox and also being a huge hypocrite because I'm not always doing this as well as I should. But just remember just to take care of your family too, to make sure that you are, you have a contingency plan to heat your home or to keep your family safe when the power goes out. Particularly in where I live in Rochester, the power goes out in my area and it's single digits out. Well, it's a problem. How am I going to make sure that my family stays warm? How do I make sure that I'm able to heat my home effectively? We up here know. I mean, at least my family knew, like, okay, if the power goes out in the wintertime, we can't just don't light a gas stove in your house. You're going to get carbon monoxide poisoning. That's a very dangerous thing to do. That's not a way to be able to heat your home effectively. You need to take care of that stuff. You can't just sit in the car. And unfortunately, we've had people in Texas where they've tried to warm up in the car. They did it in a garage or another enclosed space, and it's a really dangerous thing to do. And my point of all this is that we can't always rely on these systems to work all the time. As Tim O'Connor said, Texas blackouts are caused by bad weather. It's an unfortunate situation. That's all it is. I mean, there's stuff that they could have done, I think, Tim. Maybe. We talked about, should you prepare for winterizing? You can't prepare for every eventuality, but disasters are going to happen. So you need to make sure that your family is going to be prepared for that. There's another solution, too. There's, in addition to just being personally prepared for when something bad goes wrong, there's also the idea that I think we're not quite ready for. I don't know if the technology is quite there yet, but we could do is that you continue to decentralize the grid even more too, so that when a problem happens, it doesn't impact as wide of an area. That's the problem we get more in New York State, is that some transformer goes down and suddenly everything connected to that is going wrong. Or we all remember like the 2003 blackouts when that happened. You could decentralize the power grid even more. There's concepts like neighborhood-based nuclear reactors that they're very small. They can provide a huge amount of power. They got small modular reactors. You're able to do that and provide power to a small area. So if something happens to that, then, well, you've only lost it for a whole block. You're not losing it for an entire city, hundreds of thousands or millions of people. So that's a way you can decentralize the grid in that way. People have also talked about hydrogen-based kind of local energy production centers as well. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the solution. The problem with those solutions, they are decentralized, they are resilient, they're just less efficient. The fact of the matter is that there's a good argument to be made that the grid system that we have now is very efficient, that providing power at scale is cheaper, requires fewer resources, and probably makes more sense for what we're doing. It's just that when you put all of your eggs in one basket, when you have a massive energy grid, either the big three that we're talking about or just locally generated power, when you have all your eggs in one basket, when something goes wrong, it goes wrong for a lot of people and not just a handful of people. So when disaster strikes, it strikes for a lot more folks. So it is something to think about. Like, could we ever move to smaller scale energy production? Does technology ever catch up to the point of being able to provide power at a neighborhood scale, at a block scale? And could there be a greater free market for that? Because essentially in a lot of these places, I mean, I don't really have much choice of who brings me the power. I have some choice over who produces my power. I can buy more solar or wind or nuclear or whatever. I have some choice over that. But I don't really have any choice at all over who brings me my power. There's no free market at all in who brings me my utilities. And a lot of people don't want it that way. They aren't thinking about it outside the box in that way. But of course, we're a free solution, so we're thinking about things outside the box. We're thinking, what are the possibilities that exist outside of now? Could we have it so power exists at the household level? And of course, you can get the batteries for your house as well. You get your solar power, your wind power. If you can get the zoning for it, wind power. Wind power is a bit more tricky on a household level, but solar power, New York will subsidize the heck out of you if you want to get solar power for your house. And you could have some independence in that regard if you're willing to make the investment and do that. And that's something, I think about that a lot, particularly as my family's growing. I think about, like, how do I make sure that if the power goes out, if I'm not expecting the city, the state, whoever to help me out anytime soon, how do I take care of myself and my family? We can't always rely on the government to do that. We've got to look out for each other. Look out for your neighbors too. I'm not the type of person who thinks of us as atomized. You should look out for your neighbors. Try to take care of them where you can. I think in these moments, and we're going to see stories like this come out in Texas, we're going to see a lot of people come together, support each other, try to keep both themselves and their neighbors and their families warm. And that's the type of thing that I hope happens in this. I haven't seen many stories about this, but I hope happens, because in these disasters, humanity is usually good. Society doesn't usually break down. People want to help each other. People want to support one another. But the best way to be able to prepare to do that for yourselves and for your neighbors is also just prepare yourself if something goes wrong, because bad weather, it's going to happen. No matter how prepared you get, even if Texas does make all the repairs, no matter how prepared they get, things can still go wrong. Be ready. Take care of yourself. Take care of your family. Oh, someone online, Ryan Bedford, says, I donated to hotel rooms. That's awesome, man. I love that. And if I can, maybe I'll find some links to support this type of stuff. We should be there for each other voluntarily when something goes wrong. All right. Thanks again for listening to us here on A Free Solution. I'm going to be back on Friday. Larry Sharp will be in tomorrow. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate you listening. You guys rock. Talk to you then.